Admiral Tahoe of the Galactic Hegemony studied the human battle formations with disdain. After centuries of conquest across 12 star systems, the humans' primitive approach to warfare seemed almost laughable. Their fleet was smaller, their technology less advanced, and their formations appeared chaotic compared to the elegant precision of hegemony battle doctrine. They scatter their ships like particles in a nebula, Tahoe observed to his war council. No cohesion, no proper battle lines. Their flagship doesn't even maintain central position. His strategists nodded in agreement. The scans showed human vessels taking seemingly random positions, some clustering at odd intervals, others maintaining unusual distances. These humans survived this long through sheer luck, Tahoe declared. Their civilization is young, barely 2 millennia in space. We have refined our tactics across 50,000 cycles. The war room fell silent as the Admiral's words hung in the air. The curved walls displayed three-dimensional projections of the approaching human fleet. Tahoe's six-fingered hand moved through the hologram, breaking the light into scattered patterns as he pointed at specific human vessels. "Look here, and here," he said. "No logical spacing, no defensive perimeter. They'd move like a group of untrained children." Commander Sunwoo, Tahoe's most trusted advisor, stepped forward. His silver uniform gleamed under the room's soft lighting. "Perhaps there is some strategy we do not yet understand." Tahoe laughed, a harsh sound that made junior officers flinch. "What strategy? I have fought 117 battles. I have conquered species with far more advanced technology than these humans. Their approach lacks even basic tactical understanding." Outside the war room windows, the massive hegemony fleet hung in space like a perfect geometric sculpture. 500 warships arranged in precise formations that mathematicians had spent centuries perfecting. The dark metal hulls absorbed nearby starlight, making them appear as voids against the cosmos. Only the pulsing blue engine lights revealed their presence. The humans call their lead vessel Resilient, Intelligence Officer Juan reported, reading from her data tablet. "A presumptuous name for a ship that will not survive first contact." Tahoe nodded and walked to the central display table. The three-dimensional map showed both fleets' positions near the contested planet of Nexus 7. Rich in rare minerals, the planet had been claimed by both species, leading to this inevitable confrontation. "Their ships lack our unified shield systems," weapons specialist Kunke added. "Each vessel protects only itself rather than contributing to a collective defense." "Primitive," Tahoe agreed. "They still think as individuals rather than as parts of a greater whole." The Admiral's long career had taught him that victory in space combat was mathematical certainty. The hegemony's synchronized weapon systems could concentrate fire on specific targets while distributing incoming damage across multiple vessels. Their formations maximized firepower while minimizing vulnerability. Every aspect had been refined over thousands of years. "Have they responded to our final warning?" Tahoe asked. Communications Officer Minna looked up from her station. "They have, Admiral. Their message was unusual." "Unusual how?" "They said, 'We acknowledge your technical superiority and experience. We look forward to the education this battle will provide.'" Laughter rippled through the war room. Even Tahoe allowed himself a small smile. The human response showed either remarkable arrogance or foolish bravery. "They seek education. Then let us teach them the price of challenging the hegemony," Tahoe said. He pulled up the battle plans on the main display. The hegemony fleet would advance in the stellar spear formation, a perfect cone of destroyers protecting the heavier battleships. Their synchronized shields would make them virtually impenetrable, while their forward-facing weapons created a concentrated point of destruction. The humans appeared to be using what they call scatter protocol. Tactical Analyst Jae-yun reported with obvious confusion. Their ships maintain varying distances from each other. Some appear to be moving independently of their command structure. "A sign of poor discipline," Tahoe dismissed, "or perhaps internal disagreement about their approach." As the final preparations for battle began, Tahoe felt only confidence. His career had been built on victories against species that thought they could challenge hegemony dominance. The humans would be another footnote in his impressive military record. The admiral walked to the viewport and looked out at his magnificent fleet. The ships hovered in perfect formation, a testament to unity and discipline. Their hulls gleamed with powerful weapons and advanced shield emitters. Against this technological marvel, what chance did the humans have? "Time to engagement," he asked. 4 hours, Admiral, Navigator Dongyun replied. "Begin the approach sequence," Tahoe ordered. Standard Conquest Protocol 7. The massive engines of the hegemony fleet glowed brighter as they began their advance toward the human positions. The smaller ships moved first, taking their predetermined places in the formation. Each captain knew exactly where to position their vessel down to the meter. Initiate tactical simulations based on human fleet movements, Tahoe instructed his team. "I want projected victory scenarios on my display within the hour." As his officers rushed to comply, Tahoe allowed himself a moment of reflection. These humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. Their civilization had achieved faster-than-light travel nearly 2,000 years ago, while the hegemony had been perfecting space combat since before humans wielded stone tools. "Admiral," Sun Wu said quietly, joining Tahoe at the viewport, "is there no possibility of a peaceful resolution? The mining rights to Nexus 7 could be shared." Tahoe looked at his second-in-command with surprise. "The hegemony does not share, Commander. We conquer. We rule. That is our way." "Of course, Admiral. I merely thought." "Do not think, Commander. Execute. That is how we have survived for 50 millennia." Sun Wu bowed slightly and returned to his station. Tahoe watched his fleet begin its perfect advance, the ships moving in unison like dancers performing a deadly ballet. Against such power and precision, the scattered human fleet looked like children's toys. Yet as he studied their seemingly random positions once more, a tiny doubt crept into his mind. Why would they choose such an obviously inferior approach? Were they truly ignorant of basic battle tactics, or was there something he was missing? Tahoe pushed the thought away. The humans would learn soon enough. They would learn, they would lose, and they would join the long list of species who had underestimated the galactic hegemony. The battle began predictably. The hegemony's primary battle group advanced in perfect formation, a three-dimensional lattice of destroyers protecting the central command vessels. Their synchronized shields created overlapping fields that had broken the militaries of dozens of species. The humans initially appeared to be following standard engagement protocols, until their fleet suddenly split into what looked like disorganized groups. "They're fracturing their formation," Sub-Commander Jin Wu noted with amusement. "Exactly as expected." Tahoe watched with satisfaction as his first attack wave launched. The precision of his fleet was magnificent, each ship firing in sequence, creating a perfect cascade of energy weapons. Yet somehow, the human vessels seemed to slip through gaps in the barrage. Admiral Tahoe narrowed his eyes as he watched the battle unfold on the main display. The first wave of hegemony weapons fire should have disabled at least 30% of the human fleet. Instead, their vessels moved in unexpected ways, sliding between the carefully calculated firing patterns. "Impossible," muttered Tactical Officer Haisung. "Our targeting solutions were perfect." Tahoe kept his voice level despite his growing concern. "Adjust firing solutions. Full spread, pattern Delta 9. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. No one questioned the order or showed any sign of worry. They had absolute faith in their admiral and in hegemony battle doctrine. The massive warships shifted slightly, their weapons charging for another synchronized barrage. "The humans are continuing to break into smaller groups," reported Sensor Officer Minjin. "Their communications show increased chatter between vessels." "Panic," Tahoe said with a dismissive wave. They realized their mistake and now scrambled to correct it. The second hegemony attack launched. This time, the energy weapons spread in a wider pattern, designed to catch targets regardless of evasive maneuvers. The space between the fleets lit up with blue-white pulses as hundreds of weapons discharged simultaneously. On the display, Tahoe could see several human ships taking direct hits. Their shields flared bright orange before failing completely. Yet the number of confirmed hits was still far below expectations. 17% hit rate, Jinwoo reported, his voice betraying a hint of confusion. "Admiral, that's well below our standard 90% efficiency." Tahoe stepped closer to the holographic battle map. The human vessels weren't moving randomly as he had first thought. There was a pattern to their movements, but it was unlike anything in the Hegemony tactical database. Some ships moved in tight clusters, others maintained precise distances from their neighbors, and a few darted ahead in what seemed like suicidal charges. "They're changing position based on our firing patterns," Tahoe realized. "But how are they calculating our trajectories so quickly?" Before anyone could answer, the human fleet launched its first counterattack. Instead of a synchronized barrage like the hegemonies, their weapons fired in a scattered, seemingly chaotic sequence. Some shots came from their largest vessels, others from their smallest scouts. "Brace for minimal impact," Tahoe ordered calmly. The hegemony's overlapping shield system was designed to distribute and absorb enemy fire across multiple vessels. No species had managed to penetrate it in over 3 centuries. The human weapons struck the hegemony shields, but not in the expected pattern. Instead of concentrating fire on the front of the formation where shields were strongest, their shots targeted specific junction points where the energy fields overlapped. Shield synchronization faltering in sectors 7, 13, and 22, reported Defense Officer Ji-hoon, his voice rising in pitch. 3 destroyers reporting shield failures. Tahoe's mandibles clicked in surprise. "Impossible. Target those human vessels that are disrupting our shield network. Priority fire." The hegemony gunners adjusted aim, focusing on the human ships that had caused the shield disruptions. But as soon as they did, those vessels fell back while others surged forward to take their place. "They're rotating their attack positions," Jinwoo observed. "Each vessel only fires a few shots before changing location." On the main display, Tahoe could see his perfect formation beginning to buckle as ships moved to protect their suddenly vulnerable neighbors. The elegant geometric pattern that had been the pride of the hegemony was starting to distort. "Maintain formation," Tahoe ordered sharply. "Our strength comes from unity. Do not break ranks." But the human attacks continued, each volley seemingly designed to force the hegemony ships to choose between maintaining formation and protecting themselves. It was a tactical approach Tahoe had never encountered, not an attempt to break through the hegemony's superior defenses, but to make those defenses work against themselves. "Admiral," Communications Officer Soe said urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." "Put it through," Tahoe ordered, curious despite the battle's unexpected turn. The holographic display showed a human commander. Unlike the hegemony officers with their rigid posture and formal dress, this human wore a simple uniform and had a relaxed stance. "Admiral Tahoe," the human said with a slight nod. "I am Captain Junho of the Earth Defense Force. I wanted to compliment your fleet's precision. It's truly impressive." Tahoe felt his neck scales flatten in irritation at the human's casual tone during battle. "State your purpose, human." "Just a friendly suggestion to reassess your tactical approach," Junho replied. "Your formation is beautiful but predictable. In chess terms, you've memorized the opening moves but haven't adapted to the game being played." The transmission cut before Tahoe could respond. He turned to see his officers staring at him, awaiting direction. "They seek to distract us with mind games," Tahoe declared. "Prepare third attack wave. Full power to forward batteries." As the hegemony fleet repositioned for another synchronized attack, Tahoe noticed something alarming. The human vessels weren't just evading, they were guiding his fleet's formation. Each time his ships adjusted to target the humans, they found themselves being drawn into less optimal positions. "They're baiting us," Tahoe realized suddenly. Each evasion is designed to pull our formation apart. Across the battlefield, small groups of human ships darted between the larger hegemony vessels. Their movements appeared random until Tahoe saw the pattern. They were mapping the blind spots in the hegemony's defensive grid. All vessels, break current targeting and shift to emergency protocol, Tahoe ordered. But it was too late. The human fleet suddenly converged from multiple directions, their seemingly disorganized groups revealing a coordinated strategy. They struck precisely at the weakest connection points in the hegemony formation. As explosions bloomed across his fleet, Tahoe gripped the command rail tightly. What had begun as a simple lesson in hegemony superiority was quickly becoming something unexpected, a genuine battle. By the third hour of engagement, Tahoe's perfect formation showed signs of strain. The humans weren't fighting according to any documented battle doctrine. Their ships moved independently yet somehow cohesively, like a flock of birds or school of fish rather than military units. Their approach defies tactical logic. Tahoe growled as another coordinated attack failed to eliminate the human squadrons. As if they've evolved rather than designed their strategy, Tahoe replied slowly. These movements aren't from any tactical manual. Intelligence reports began flooding in. Human communications were decentralized. Their command structure appeared fluid, with authority shifting between vessels based on positioning rather than rank. The war room had changed dramatically since the battle began. Gone was the calm confidence of the hegemony officers. Now they moved quickly between stations, their voices tense as they tried to counter the increasingly effective human attacks. Holographic displays showed damage reports across Tahoe's once perfect fleet. "Admiral, we've lost 23 ships," reported Damage Control Officer Minnow. Another 41 report critical systems failures. Tahoe paced before the main tactical display. The elegant formation he had deployed was now broken in multiple sectors. Ships that should have maintained precise positions had been forced to move defensively, creating gaps in their coverage. "Where is their command center?" Tahoe demanded. "Find me their control node." Intelligence Officer Juwan looked up from her console, frustration evident in her eyes. "That's what's confusing us, Admiral. There doesn't seem to be one. Each human captain appears to be making independent decisions, yet somehow they're coordinating perfectly." On the display, a group of human ships executed a complex maneuver. They split apart, then rejoined at a different angle, slipping through a gap in the hegemony's defenses to strike at a vulnerable destroyer before scattering again. "It's like watching a school of fish evade a predator," observed Science Officer Yunji. She had been unusually quiet during the battle, but now stepped forward. The movements follow biological patterns, not military ones. Tahoe turned to her, his scales darkening with stress. "Explain." "Look here," Yunji said, highlighting a section of the battle. "When our weapons target this group, they don't all flee in the same direction. They spread out, but maintain awareness of each other's positions. When one section is threatened, others respond without apparent communication." Tactical Officer Wujin nodded slowly. "She's right. Their movements resemble natural systems more than military formations. There's no central command giving orders." Tahoe struggled to understand. All his military training, all 50,000 cycles of hegemony battle doctrine, was based on hierarchy and control. A fleet without a clear command structure should fall into chaos, not function more effectively. "Show me their communication patterns," he ordered. The display shifted to show signal traffic between human vessels. Instead of the expected centralized command network, they saw countless small data packets bouncing between ships in a mesh pattern. "It's a distributed network," Communications Specialist Doyun said with reluctant admiration. "No single point of failure. Each ship shares local information with its neighbors, which pass it along. They're creating a real-time tactical awareness without needing central coordination." As Tahoe watched, a new human attack pattern formed. Their vessels converged from different directions, focusing fire on a hegemony cruiser that had drifted slightly out of position. The cruiser's shields buckled under the concentrated attack, and it exploded in a brief, brilliant flash. 3 more cruisers lost in Sector 9, reported Sensor Officer Jaya. Human vessels are already redistributing to new attack vectors. Tahoe slammed his fist on the command console. This cannot be. Their technology is inferior. Their species is young. How are they defeating our perfect system? Admiral, Yunji said carefully, I believe they're using what we would call emergent behavior. Their individual ships follow simple rules, but the interaction of these rules creates complex, adaptive behavior at the fleet level. Like insects in a colony, Wujin added, no single ant knows the colony strategy, but together they solve complex problems. Tahoe's mind raced. In all his years of combat, he had never encountered a species that approached warfare this way. The hegemony's strength came from unity and precision, each ship following exact orders from the command hierarchy. The humans had found a way to turn this precision against them by being unpredictable yet coordinated. If there's no central command, Tahoe said slowly, then targeting their flagship won't disrupt their operations. Exactly, Juan confirmed. We've disabled 3 vessels we identified as potential command ships. Their fleet's effectiveness didn't decrease at all. Outside the viewports, Tahoe could see his once magnificent fleet in disarray. Ships that had trained together for decades were now struggling to maintain defensive positions against the fluid human attacks. When the hegemony vessels tried to regroup into standard formations, the human ships would immediately probe for weaknesses created during the transition. They're adapting faster than we can, Sub-Commander Jinwoo said quietly. Each time we change tactics, they respond more quickly. A junior officer approached with a data tablet. Admiral, we've intercepted some human communications. They're not what we expected. Tahoe took the tablet and read the translated messages. Instead of detailed orders or battle plans, the communications contained simple updates about local conditions, position data, and brief tactical suggestions. There were no ranks mentioned, no officers demanding compliance. Some messages even contained questions rather than commands. They're discussing the battle, Tahoe said incredulously, as if they're colleagues rather than a military hierarchy. That's consistent with their decentralized approach, Yunji explained. Each captain contributes information to the collective, and the best ideas are adopted quickly without needing official approval. Another explosion rocked the command ship. The lights flickered momentarily as backup systems engage. Forward shield grid failing, reported Defense Officer Hanuel. Rerouting power from secondary systems. Tahoe looked at the tactical display again. The battle had shifted from a straightforward conquest to something he had never experienced. A genuine challenge. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Tahoe felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Doubt. We need to adapt, he said finally. The standard doctrine isn't working against this enemy. His officers looked at him in shock. Never in recorded history had a hegemony admiral suggested deviating from established battle protocol. Sir, Jinwoo asked uncertainly. Break formation, Tahoe ordered, his voice firm despite the radical nature of his command. All ships, individual defensive protocols. Abandon synchronized firing patterns. As his orders spread throughout the fleet, Tahoe watched the human vessels closely. Would they adapt to this new approach as quickly as they had to the others? The answer came swiftly as the human fleet shifted once again, their seemingly chaotic movements revealing a deeper pattern, one that Tahoe was only beginning to understand. Admiral, we've completed the analysis of human fleet movements, Tactical Officer Minji reported. It's not what we expected. The display showed the complex mathematics behind the human fleet's behavior. They weren't using fixed formations but adaptive algorithms, their positions constantly shifting based on real-time battle conditions. Each ship functioned both independently and as part of a greater whole. They're using emergent behavior systems, Tahoe realized with growing alarm, derived from their planet's natural swarms and flocks. The humans had encoded the collective intelligence of Earth's biological systems into their military doctrine. There was no central point of failure, no command node to target. The command center fell silent as officers stared at the display. 6 hours into the battle, the hegemony fleet had suffered unprecedented losses. Nearly a third of their ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest struggled to maintain any semblance of coordination. Minji enlarged the tactical display, showing a three-dimensional model of the human fleet movements over time. Complex mathematical formulas scrolled alongside the model. "We've identified 3 primary algorithms they're using," she explained, her voice steady despite the shock evident on her face. "This one mimics the movement patterns of earthbirds called starlings. They form massive flocks that can change direction instantly without collisions." The display showed human ships moving in flowing patterns, spreading apart, and coming together with fluid grace. "This second pattern," Minji continued, "resembles how their ocean fish respond to predators. When attacked, they scatter in precise ways that confuse targeting systems while maintaining group cohesion." Tahoe watched the simulation with growing understanding. The humans weren't being random at all. Their chaotic-seeming movements followed deep natural patterns that had evolved over millions of years on their home planet. "And the third?" he asked quietly. "The third algorithm appears to be based on their social insects, ants and bees," Minji said. "It governs how they share information through the fleet. When one ship discovers a weakness, that information spreads to nearby vessels, which then exploit it without needing orders." Science Officer Yunji stepped forward. "Admiral, we've been fighting them completely wrong. Our approach assumes centralized control and perfect information. Theirs assumes limited local information but perfect adaptation." Across the room, Intelligence Officer Juan was reviewing intercepted human communications. "Sir, I found something important in their transmissions. They're not using a standard command structure at all. Their captains rotate leadership roles based on tactical position." "Explain," Tahoe demanded. "They call it situational command," Juan said. "The ship with the best tactical view of a particular engagement automatically assumes local command for that action only. Once completed, command shifts to whoever has the next best position." Tahoe's scales darkened as the realization hit him. "So there is no permanent leader to target?" "Exactly," confirmed Juan. "Leadership is a function, not a person or ship." The main view screen showed the ongoing battle. The once proud hegemony formation was now scattered across space, individual ships fighting for survival against the continuously adapting human fleet. Explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum as more hegemony vessels succumbed to the coordinated attacks. Tahoe turned to the research console where Yunji was examining data on human evolution. "Tell me about Earth," he said. "Tell me what produced this thinking." Yunji pulled up images of the human homeworld. "A highly dynamic environment, Admiral. Frequent natural disasters, rapidly changing climates, thousands of competing species. Their evolution required constant adaptation rather than perfection of a single approach. Unlike our homeworld," Tahoe noted, "the hegemony had evolved on a stable planet with predictable seasons and few natural predators. Their society valued order and hierarchy above all else. Their history shows the same pattern," added historian Kiyun, who had been quietly analyzing human cultural data. "Their military development wasn't linear like ours. They experienced constant disruption from competing nations, forcing continuous tactical innovation." Tahoe turned back to the battle display. What he had dismissed as primitive chaos now revealed itself as something far more sophisticated, a flexible system designed to adapt to any threat without central coordination. "Can we counter this approach?" he asked. The officers exchanged glances. Finally, Tactical Officer Minji spoke. "Not with our current doctrine, Admiral. Our entire strategic framework assumes predictable enemy responses to standard formations. The humans don't use standard anything." On the view screen, another hegemony cruiser erupted in flames as a coordinated human attack overwhelmed its defenses. "They're targeting our command and control systems specifically," Communications Officer Sohi reported. Each time we try to re-establish fleet-wide coordination, they concentrate fire on our communication nodes. Taiho stood silent for a long moment. In 50 years of military service, he had never faced defeat. The hegemony had conquered 12 star systems through superior discipline and unwavering adherence to proven tactics. But now those same strengths had become vulnerabilities against an enemy that operated by completely different rules. "Show me their adaptation rate," he ordered. A new graph appeared on the display, showing how quickly the human fleet responded to hegemony tactical changes. The line curved sharply upward. "They're learning from us," Minji explained. "Each time we deploy a new formation or attack pattern, they analyze it and develop countermeasures. Their response time has decreased by 67% since the battle began." Taiho felt a strange sensation, something between fear and admiration. The humans had taken their biological limitations and turned them into a strategic advantage. Instead of trying to match the hegemony's perfect coordination, they had embraced a completely different approach based on their natural evolution. "Admiral," Jinwoo said urgently, "the human flagship is hailing us again." Taiho nodded, and the screen shifted to show the human commander. Captain Junho looked calm despite the chaos of battle around him. "Admiral Taiho," he said respectfully, "I think you now understand what you're facing. We don't wish to destroy your entire fleet. Are you ready to discuss terms?" Pride made Taiho want to refuse, but duty to his surviving crews forced him to consider the offer. He studied the human's face, looking for signs of the arrogance or bloodlust he expected from a victor. Instead, he saw only professional respect. "You've studied our biology, our evolution," Taiho said. "You designed your entire battle strategy around our weaknesses." Captain Junho shook his head slightly. "No, Admiral. We designed our strategy around our strengths. Humanity has never had the luxury of perfect coordination or absolute control. We've always had to adapt to survive. Today, that adaptation served us well." As the transmission ended, Taiho turned to face his officers. The truth was now inescapable. The hegemony's perfect system, refined across 50,000 cycles, had been defeated by an approach they had never considered valid. In trying to achieve tactical perfection, they had lost the ability to adapt. The hegemony fleet, pride of a 12-system empire, began to disintegrate under the onslaught of human attacks. Wherever Taiho reinforced his lines, the human vessels would briefly withdraw, only to surge forward elsewhere against weaker points. "They're not following any central command," Taiho told his increasingly desperate officers. "They're each responding to their immediate environment while following basic rules." The elegant formations of the hegemony broke apart as ships tried to respond to attacks coming from constantly shifting angles. The mathematical precision that had been their greatest strength became their fatal weakness. "Send the surrender signal," Taiho finally ordered, "and prepare the data archives for transmission." "The archives, Admiral?" asked Commander Doyen. "Yes," Taiho replied, watching the remains of his once magnificent fleet drift powerless in space. "We have much to learn from these humans." As the human ships ceased fire and moved to secure the hegemony vessels, Taiho realized that today marked more than just a military defeat. It was the beginning of a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understood conflict itself. Smoke filled the bridge of the hegemony flagship as damaged systems sparked and failed. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the faces of the crew. The once proud officers now looked tired and confused as they watched their perfect military machine fall apart around them. Through the main viewport, Taiho could see the scattered remains of his fleet. Ships that had trained together for decades now drifted without power or spun slowly with critical damage. The elegant formation that had conquered 12 star systems was gone, replaced by a chaotic spread of damaged vessels. "Status report," Taiho ordered, his voice calm despite the disaster unfolding before him. Damage Control Officer Chunho looked up from his console, his face streaked with soot. "Admiral, we've lost 63% of our combat vessels. Another 22% report critical system failures. Only 15% remain combat capable. The numbers were staggering. Never in hegemony history had a fleet suffered such losses. Tahoe felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Thousands of crew members had died because he had underestimated the humans, because they all had. The human fleet is regrouping, reported Tactical Officer Minji. They're forming a containment perimeter around our remaining ships. On the tactical display, Tahoe could see the human vessels arranging themselves in a loose sphere around the hegemony survivors. Unlike the rigid patterns his own fleet had used, their formation was fluid, with ships constantly adjusting positions based on the movement of their targets. They could destroy us completely, Sub-Commander Jinwoo observed quietly. But they're holding back. Tahoe nodded slowly. They want surrender, not annihilation. He straightened his uniform, a gesture of dignity in defeat. And they shall have it. There is no logic in further resistance. The word surrender sent a ripple of shock through the bridge. In 50,000 cycles, the hegemony had never surrendered to an enemy. Their doctrine didn't even include protocols for such an event. Admiral, Defense Coordinator Minho protested, perhaps we could regroup at the jump point and what? Tahoe interrupted. Watch more of our people die. The battle is lost, Coordinator. I will not sacrifice more lives to preserve my pride. Silence fell over the bridge as the reality settled in. Tahoe turned to Communications Officer Soe. Open a channel to the human flagship. The main screen flickered to life, showing Captain Juno on the bridge of his vessel. Unlike the hegemony ship with its smoke and emergency lighting, the human bridge appeared calm and orderly. Admiral Tahoe, Juno greeted with a respectful nod. Are you prepared to discuss terms? I am prepared to surrender my fleet, Tahoe replied formally, on condition that my crews be treated according to galactic conventions of war. The human captain nodded. Of course, we have no desire for unnecessary casualties. Cease all defensive operations and power down your weapon systems. Medical teams are standing by to assist your wounded. Tahoe gave the order, and throughout the remaining hegemony ships, weapons powered down and shields deactivated. It was the first time in his career that he had ordered such an action. Captain Juno, Tahoe said, I request one additional condition. The human raised an eyebrow. Go on. I wish to transmit our tactical archives to your fleet. Our complete military database, spanning 50,000 cycles. Behind him, Tahoe heard gasps of shock from his officers. What he proposed was unthinkable, giving an enemy the collected military wisdom of the hegemony. On screen, Captain Junho looked equally surprised. That's unexpected, Admiral. May I ask why? Tahoe gestured to the battlefield around them. Your approach to warfare has proven superior to ours. But our history contains valuable lessons as well. Together, perhaps they create something greater than either alone. Junho studied him for a moment before nodding. A generous offer. We accept. As the communication ended, Commander Dohyun approached Tahoe. Admiral, the High Council will see this as treason, he said quietly. The High Council was not here today, Tahoe replied. They did not see what we saw, a fundamental flaw in our approach that has gone unchallenged for millennia. He walked to the viewport, watching as human shuttles began approaching the damaged hegemony vessels with medical teams and technical support. Our greatest strength became our greatest weakness, Tahoe explained to his gathered officers. We perfected a single approach to warfare, made it mathematical, precise, beautiful. But in doing so, we lost the ability to adapt. He turned to face them. The humans never sought such perfection. Their history forced them to value adaptation over consistency. Today, they taught us the price of rigid thinking. Through the viewport, Tahoe could see the first human boarding parties entering hegemony ships, not as conquerors but as rescuers. Their approach to victory seemed as unconventional as their approach to combat. This defeat may save our civilization, Tahoe said softly, if we are wise enough to learn from it. As human and hegemony medical teams worked side by side to treat the wounded, Tahoe began preparing the data transfer of the military archives. 50,000 cycles of tactical wisdom would flow to the humans, but what would return would be something new, a hybrid approach that combined hegemony precision with human adaptability. The galaxy was about to change, Tahoe realized. The defeat of his fleet would mark the beginning of a new era of warfare, one that valued flexibility over rigidity, adaptation over perfection. And perhaps, he thought as he watched humans helping his injured crew members, something even more important might emerge from this day. The recognition that different species could learn from each other rather than merely seeking to conquer. The stars shone silently beyond the viewport, indifferent to the momentous shift that had occurred in their midst.